Welcome to the latest edition of Muddy River News This Week. I'm David Adam. I'm the editor of Muddy River News, and joining me today is Corey Mehaffy. He is the Economic Development Director, or Executive Director, I should say, of the Northeast Missouri Economic Development Association. Did I get it all right?
Council. Northeast Missouri Economic Development Council.
Close. Yes. But nonetheless,
Great.
The fact is you're in charge of helping spur economic development in Hannibal. But first I want to let the viewers know you're originally from Quincy, correct?
I am originally from Quincy, that's right.
Tell me a little bit about your background. We were talking before we went to start recording this, that you grew up in Quincy, left, came back. Where have you gone in your lifetime to end up back here in Hannibal?
Yeah, so I actually ended up graduating from Quincy High School. Grew up here in Quincy, obviously, and then sometime, I believe about the second half of my 8th grade year, our family moved to Galesburg, Illinois, which was obviously interesting playing sports with the Western Big Six conference. But moved there for a few years. My mother had decided my father was still going to be traveling, that we were at least going to move back to Quincy with our friends, and so we did that. The hope was if we moved there, he'd be home a little bit more often, and so we moved back to Quincy, and I did end up graduating from Quincy High School.
Okay. Now, you were working in economic development in Moberly
Correct.
for about a decade or so, and left in 2018 to come to Hannibal. I think I remember reading your bio, started in January of 2019, correct?
Correct, yes.
How does one get in? It's not like you can go to college and say, I want to become an economic development director. How do you get involved in economic development?
Yeah, most of my experience prior to that was in business development on the other side of the table, largely in retail and commercial operations. I was fortunate enough to work with a number of individuals. Worked on the corporate side for quite a while, and then got out of the corporate side, worked on the franchise side, which I greatly enjoyed, and worked with some individuals that were franchisees for a number of different retailers. We bought and sold a lot of businesses together, and so that gave me the business development experience.
Mm-hmm.
When my family moved to Moberly, we had made a multi-year commitment to the Christian college there in Moberly to do some things to help the college. During that time, obviously, the entrepreneurial part of me was still working on projects with the economic developer at the time there, and then other economic developers in the communities in the area. That led to that particular economic developer moved back to Mexico, Missouri, where he's from, and the organization had contacted me. At the time, our son was in high school, and so we weren't really looking to make a move, and so it afforded me the opportunity to move into a position where we could stay in Moberly. And so we were there about 16, 17 years. I was with MAEDC for about 10, almost 11 of those years.
Now that you've been in Hannibal, really for now about 3.5 years, what are some of the, especially for people from Quincy that might be watching this, what are some of the latest economic development issues or things that have gone on in your community that people should know about? Sure.
So we've been obviously involved in a lot of different things. We've been fortunate in Hannibal and Marion and Rawls County to have a significant amount of investment over the last several years. We've probably topped $200 million worth of new investment. A lot of that's been reinvestment from our employers. Some of our larger employers obviously continue to make large investments. We've had some smaller investments. We've had a number of attraction projects. Those have been smaller, but we've seen a good amount of investment in the area, which has been great. Along with that, obviously, we've been working to set some things back into place. There's been, as an example, the Marion County Port Authority has been in place for a number of years. It really had been dormant. And so that became one of my responsibilities when I came to HRADC. And so we've been working with the Missouri Department of Transportation to put that back in place. We've done that recently. We seated a board. We had some conversations with Rawls County about expanding the boundaries associated with that. So that's why it's now the Marion Rawls Regional Port Authority. They were interested in working with us and partnering with us on that. So that, as an example, the Hannibal Industrial Development Corporation was another corporation that has a revolving loan fund that's had been for years in Hannibal, important to some of the small businesses. It had kind of been dormant for a number of years, and so we've been working on putting that organization back together. We did get that done. We've had some meetings with the shareholders. We've got kind of some board members put back in place to that. We actually are in the process right now of issuing our first loan, small business loan, through that program. We've recently worked with MU Extension back as I was coming here in January of 19 to bring a full-time small business development center to our office. So we have a full-time small business development counselor in partnership with MU Extension. And so they provide a grant that pays for a portion of that, and then we pay for a portion of that. That particular office serves 7 counties in Northeast Missouri. So we serve a few more counties than technically HRADC does on the economic development front. So just a number of different things. We've started a new program for entrepreneurship we call Ignite. That's just an effort for us to really provide some networking opportunities for some of our small business owners, and so they can learn best practices from one another. But it's also a way that we can bring in some of the service providers and get them involved. And it's also a way for us to attract new investors to the community, then also new entrepreneurs to the community. So we've been very successful in that. Our SBDC office obviously is an important part of that, but that program has helped to start a number of new businesses in the region.
And when you say region, define the region for people who are watching us for the first time. Who do you serve?
Sure. So HREDC actually contracts with Marion County and Rawls County and the cities within those counties. And so for what you would call traditional economic development services, similar to what GREDF would be here, for folks who are familiar with GREDF here on the Quincy side, we serve Marion and Rawls County. That SBDC office serves 7 counties, and so obviously we assist with those services as well. So that goes all the way up to Clark County and then down to Pike County, and then west of us over into Monroe and Shelby County.
Gotcha.
As well.
When people, I think of retail, of economic development, they see the box stores, they see the restaurants and such, and that's all still a big part of what you're trying to do. But do you have a wish list? Do you have things that you'd like to see come to this region that either you're working on or would like to start working on that may not necessarily be, hey, they brought a Target to Hannibal like they did here in Quincy?
Sure, yeah, and we do get, obviously we get the want list from people as I travel around town. I hear that from people regularly. People put that on Facebook
What's
regularly.
the one around here it's always been Red Lobster. It seems to be the big one that everybody wants.
Yeah.
What do they want in Hannibal that you kind of go, why do you want that?
I don't necessarily say why do you want that, but probably the thing I hear the most from people is Hy-Vee, obviously.
Okay.
Folks in Hannibal are very interested in having Hy-Vee, and many of them frankly travel here to shop at the Hy-Vee, and so that's one I hear a lot. There are a number of different concepts that people are interested in, but retail and commercial is really interesting in economic development. Many economic development organizations don't really get involved in that because there is quite a bit of competition, obviously, in that, and so sometimes that can lead to some political issues for the economic development group. In my opinion, and in our board's opinion, it's cyclical. And so we know that as people, particularly in industry, travel to our area to look at making an investment, it's important for them to see that we have a certain amount of national and regional flags flying, that we have a certain amount of commercial retail, we have some quality of life to be able to help them both attract and retain good quality employees. So to us, it's cyclical. Same thing on the retail side. As they come, the first question they want to know is how many major employers do you have? How many people do they employ? What are their compensation levels? Those types of things. So in my opinion, in rural areas, it's important to be involved in both of those to support the economy. And of course, we can talk all day about the importance of that to the taxing jurisdictions and to some of the other merchants in the area as well.
Do you have incentives to get these developers and retailers to Hannibal? Talk about those types of incentives.
We do. So obviously there's federal level incentives, which would be similar to what is offered in all of the states. Each of the states sometimes take those pass-throughs of those dollars and treat them a little bit differently in each of the programs, so that's always interesting. We have some state level incentives, obviously, and then we have local level incentives that we work with as well. And so each of the communities obviously have a varying comfort level with some of those types of things. And so that's part of our discussions with them as we're looking at sites with our prospects is what types of things they would offer. And those range for tax credit programs to tax abatement programs, sales tax rebates, in some cases for large enough projects, sales tax abatements. There's a number of different programs, and usually the way we start that conversation with the prospect is, if they're interested in learning about those programs, is we look at the project, determine what types of programs they would qualify for, and then we sort of narrow that discussion to that.
So do you have efforts already underway? And I guess how many sorts of projects are you working on typically all the time?
Sure.
Again, in regards to major manufacturers or the retail side? Yeah,
so we carry a pretty consistent project load in our office, again, both between HREDC and our SBDC office. Obviously, our SBDC counselor is an employee of HREDC, but I separate those sometimes in the conversation because we serve a larger territory in one.
Right.
So if you look at the entire office and the entire territory we encompass, we typically carry a project load of active projects somewhere between 70 and 80 projects.
Okay.
And those could be anywhere from, small startup businesses with, mom and pop two employees and a 30 to 50 to $100,000 investment to, we're literally working with corporations that are looking at, hundreds and hundreds of jobs and hundreds of millions of dollars of investment. And,
right.
and that's one of the things that really, makes economic development fun, in my opinion. Every day is a little bit different. It's important for us, whether we're working with the General Mills of the world or whether we're working with a startup company, provide that same level of service.
Right.
And frankly, it's a little bit more fun sometimes to work with some of the smaller businesses, especially when you're helping them, if they've started in the garage or at the kitchen table, you're helping them with that business plan, the financial projections, you help them with the financing stack, and all of a sudden they make that first move, and it's really exciting to sort of see those dreams come true. And so that's one of the reasons why we've worked so hard to put the SBDC office in place as well, just to support entrepreneurship.
As people would drive down Broadway in Quincy, they would always see the empty Shopko building, the empty Kmart building, the empty County Market building, and Quincy has filled two of those three in the last year or so. Are there buildings when you drive down McMaster's Avenue or down Broadway in Hannibal that you go, man, we've got to get something in that place?
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that. When I first came back in January of 19, I met over the first couple of months with couple hundred folks in the community just to introduce myself, to learn a little bit about the needs in the community, to find out what was of interest to people. And two of those buildings that came up in nearly every single conversation were the St. Elizabeth Hospital, or the former St. Elizabeth Hospital, and the old Federal Building, or the former post office there. And so we do have developers that are working towards those projects in both of those buildings. They've been an important part of our portfolio as we've moved forward. We've been through multiple developers on each of those buildings. Right. And working towards trying to find some solutions to move those forward. So I would say those are probably two sort of catalysts, as I call them, projects that people in the community are very interested in seeing. St. E is very emotional for a lot of people that grew up. People were born there. People had family members spend their last minutes there. I mean, it's an emotional thing for us. And of course, for the neighborhood, it's been blight on the neighborhood. And so it's important for us to figure out a way, to find some solutions for that.
We'll just put that Hy-Vee in the hospital. That might be the easiest way to do that.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
We may have some, historic guidelines for them to follow, but yeah, absolutely. So it's those would be a couple of those. Obviously, the former Sutherland building, we've had that building under contract with prospects a couple of different times. The last time was during COVID, and that kind of blew that deal, unfortunately, at the last minute. We do have some interested parties looking at that. There's been some press recently about one of those. It's a local party looking at that. And so we believe that there are a couple of letters of intent flying back and forth on that building as well. And so we'll be excited to see some of those buildings get full. Obviously, as you know from some of the buildings you cited here, I mean, you continue to. I remember going to the Kmart when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I got an icy at the Kmart, right, riding my bike over there. So I remember sort of watching those buildings.
Not as emotional as St. Elizabeth's, but
not
still
quite.
But getting
quite.
an icy from the Kmart was an emotional experience.
It was a big deal, right? And I'd run over to the mall and watch TV in the air conditioning. That was a good thing too. So it was. Seeing those buildings continue to deteriorate is difficult, and then knowing from the taxing jurisdiction's perspective, the school districts and the other taxing jurisdictions, that those revenues continue to decline. It's important for us to put those buildings back in service for the neighborhoods, but it's also important for us, to help the taxing jurisdictions generate the revenues they should be.
The Missouri Department of Transportation has been putting out a plan to build a bypass around Hannibal on US 61. How would that bypass, first of all, can you give me any idea of the status of that bypass and where it is in the plan, in the pipeline, and also how would that affect economic development in Hannibal?
Sure. So back in 2019, we started having conversations about that. As you know, that conversation's been going on for a number of years. The Tri-State Development Summit's been a big part of that. The Tom and Tom, as I like to call them, Tom Oakley and Tom Bolin, were very instrumental in a lot of transportation projects, as you know, around here. And so that conversation had been going on. I was literally handed a book that sat on the corner of my desk that was the engineering study that was done for the bypass back in the mid-90s.
Okay.
17 options that they looked at for that bypass, and of course that's ridiculous in and of itself. But anyway, nothing really kind of ever happened with that, as you know. And so we decided that transportation was continuing to be an important part of economic development, not only in Hannibal but on the Missouri side. And so after Tom Boland passed, we needed to sort of pick up that torch and carry that on. And so we've created a transportation committee under HRADC that meets regularly. We have a number of projects we're working on. The bypass is one of those. We're fortunate that MoDOT does attend those meetings with us as well. Our federal contingent, our state contingent, a lot of other folks attend that meeting with us as well. And so what's come out of that is the need for a new engineering study, just to identify what the proposed alignment would be. We've had some pretty serious conversations about that. I'm not particularly interested in wasting $2 million of taxpayer money to do another study that sits on the desk for 30 years. Mm-hmm. If we're really going to move this conversation forward, we need to do that. But if we're going to do that, we need to move this conversation forward. And so what I've found is when I first came, people would talk about, landowners may not be excited about this, or business owners may not be excited about this. So our transportation committee's been having conversations with utility partners, with business owners, with landowners, with other folks, just to explain some of the benefits, obviously, that this could potentially bring to the community. I get a lot of feedback on the stoplights, as you can imagine.
I mean, I keep hearing nothing but traffic congestion
right.
on 61.
Absolutely. And so even our prospects, 9 times out of 10, when I'm in initial conversations with a prospect, either they or their site consultant will say, yeah, I got a ticket in your community. So that's always fun. And so we've been, sort of discussing those things. We have letters, obviously, from our existing employers that would like to see us be able to have trucks up to 55 miles an hour as quick as possible and keep them there. Yeah. We have folks that we've been looking to bring to the community that have provided input on that. And so we've been fortunate that MoDOT we had applied for a grant federally to try to get some funding for the study. We were not successful in that, and so MoDOT decided this last year that they would help us by taking on that project. So they have put out an RFQ. They've now hired a consultant. I believe they're finalizing the scoping of that and what work will be done. And so then at that point, those folks will also start coming to our transportation committee meetings. And right. So we'll be able to use that as our citizens advisory group and start that project forward. So we're excited, to have a new study and to see what the alignment is. We're going to look at a few other transportation related safety issues on McMaster's as well. McMaster's is a tough one. Obviously we have a school district there, and we have HLG there. We have a lot of houses there. I'm not sure that the public is really aware of some of the things that travel through that corridor. We know there's about 4,400 trucks a day that go through there. We know there's about 30 to 40,000 cars pre-COVID, 40, now 30, starting to build back. Mm-hmm. And so it's an important corridor, but we've got to figure out what that looks like. Our office actually is located on that corridor, and so literally turning in and out of our parking lot. It used to be at certain times of the day. Now it's any time of the day.
No kidding.
I literally leave the opposite direction and go out through the residential area just to avoid McMaster's at all costs. And so, as far as benefits go, I think it'll be important to our existing employers. It will be important to those we're looking to attract from an industry perspective. But I think it's also going to give us an opportunity for growth. Right now, really, frankly, if you look at the McMaster's corridor, we're really landlocked. We have a lot of interest in commercial and retail development in the market. We just don't have a lot of place to put people. So we've been looking at where do we create a secondary retail opportunity. And of course, what complicates that conversation is, is the bypass going to happen? Because if it's going to happen, perhaps that can be it. If it's not going to happen, then what is our backup plan for that? And if it is going to happen, how many years will it take? Because we have interest right now. So it's kind of a challenging conversation. So that committee takes that on along with a number of other items they're working on. So
thank you for joining me today. It's been fascinating to hear about all the things that are going on there. Best of luck in getting that bypass finally taken care of, something that city has been clamoring for a long time.
Absolutely. We recently wrote some federal grants for that as well, as I mentioned, and we had 45 or 6 letters of support from from the tri-state area for that. So it is not only just an important project for Hannibal, but it's important for Quincy and Keokuk and Macomb and many of our other partners through the Tri-State Development Summit. And so I think it's an important transportation project nationally, frankly, and so it's incumbent upon us to get that done.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And thank you for joining us today. You can catch this video and other videos like this at muddyrivernews.com.